Welcome back to Media 7, where we're discussing the toxic fallout from an award-winning investigative story that is found to be both unfair and unbalanced. As you heard earlier in the program, in 2007, the Qantas Television Awards judges received a letter warning them that TV3's 2006 documentary, Let Us Spray, was flawed, but went ahead and gave it the award for Best Investigative Programme. The chair of the News and Current Affairs judges, Paul Norris, went further than that. In the week following the awards, he accused ESR Chief Executive John Hay, in whose name the letter was sent out, of an out-of-order attempt to influence the judges. Despite his outspokenness 2 years ago, Norris repeatedly declined to join us now and discuss the award in light of the BSA's findings against Let Us Spray. But Simon Pound went to Wellington to talk to the author of the letter, ESR lawyer Matt McClelland. He began by asking McClelland why he took issue with the program being honoured.
The program said that the ESR serum study was seriously flawed, and this is a study that's been conducted by highly reputable scientists with worldwide reputations, and for them simply just to say that and not give us any chance to comment about it, it was very damaging to the reputations of the scientists who are all identifiable. We felt that because the breaches, in our view, were so obvious, so straightforward, we had hoped that they would just put everything on hold until a final determination had been made.
What was the response from the Qantas Awards conveners?
Surprising. The response was surprising. We did copy our letter to the media judges to TV3, and they came back and wrote us a letter, but the Qantas Media Award judge effectively said that the Broadcasting Standards Authority is a process quite different from the Qantas Media Awards, and that just because a complaint had been made didn't mean to say that they couldn't judge the program as part of that award process.
Were you disappointed with the response of the Qantas judges?
Their response was simply, it's got nothing to do with it, and we asked for a copy of the judging criteria, and they weren't prepared to give those to us. But yes, I think it was important because, you know, the media awards are an important part of journalism in New Zealand. They are understood by the public as being important, and we felt that it was unfair the way that the program had been prepared. And yes.
Do you think that the errors are so great that the rest of the documentary cannot be an award winner?
Had the Qantas media judges been aware that the BSA had determined that the program had been made in serious breach of the broadcasting standards, then I think it's highly unlikely that they would have awarded the program the best investigative program. I think had the decision been available, I just can't see that they would have done that. So I'm not sure what they can do. It's interesting. I'm not sure whether they can take the award away from them, and I'm not sure that ESR really wants that. ESR wanted to restore the reputation of its scientists and its reputation, and in large part that's what's happened. So really it's up to the media and the judges to determine what should happen.
Simon Pound there talking to ESR's lawyer Matthew McClelland. Well, what to make of the awards process now that Let Us Spray has officially been found wanting? I'm joined by Newsroom's political editor Marie McNicholas, who has covered the Paratutu story a number of times and herself grew up in the suburb. Rick Freeson, Chief Executive of the awards organiser, the Television Broadcasters Council, and former Chief Operating Officer of TV3's owner, MediaWorks, and investigative reporter Phil Kitchen, who has repeatedly been honoured in the Qantas Media Awards but remains a critic of the awards standards. Welcome to you all. Now, Marie, you've written about this issue and touched on your personal connection to it. What did you make of Let Us Spray?
Well, I'll declare a conflict of interest straight up. And my father, for 25 years, was the Chief City Health Inspector. But he died, as it happens, 13 years ago today, of cancer. He lived in that neighbourhood for almost the entire 30 years that my parents lived in New Plymouth. My mother, he died at age 66. My mother developed cancer at age 48. So if anyone had good reason to cling, to grasp for a reason, some blame, I guess our family did, but in fact it didn't, and it hasn't. And I think
why is that?
Well, I think that there are some. There's at least two health professionals in the family. I think we let our heads rule our hearts for most of it, though not all of it, because our hearts feel sick about the state of that neighbourhood, and that's another story actually. But my impression of the program when it first aired was, at first I was impatient because I was waiting for something new. Now, if you've worked as a journalist in New Plymouth, which I did in my early career, or you've lived there, a lot of it was not new. And in fact, the local newspaper has blazed a trail on this. They've been streets ahead of everybody, and their coverage has been excellent. Even recently, until recently, it's been excellent. So I was waiting for something new. It didn't really come. I was a bit alarmed by some of the sensational language. And then when the new claims finally came, which was around the serum study, I've spent at least the last 10 years covering politics in Wellington, and you know that when something hits you in the face like that, it always pays to go for the cock-up theory over conspiracy theory. It's almost always the explanation. And I was baffled by why they were using a forensic accountant. As soon as you use the word forensic, you imply fraud or an offence or the courts. Accountants deal with pure numbers. And where was a biostatistician or an epidemiologist? Because they are trained to draw distinctions between pure numbers and background noises, which is what you get with health statistics. You get a lot of background noise because people are dying and getting sick anyway.
Yeah, I thought it was ironic that one of the post reviewers was Chris Frampton at Otago University, because I've used him before on media stories. He's very helpful. Would it have been helpful to have someone like that in the program? Because there were no scientists in there.
Yes, and you know, when I read the judgment, it was only when I read the judgment, because I'd lost track of the story, because it was several years ago now, I didn't realise that there'd been this toing and froing over whether ESR had been given a right of reply, and it alarmed me that they hadn't. And I mean, when I wrote it for the Listener, and I loathe, you know, I hate to quote a politician here, but I remember the health minister at the time, Pete Hodgson, he said something quite interesting. He said, as he had a science background, he said, he can't explain why. Why would a scientist want to corrupt his own data? Now, why would they? And the story that wasn't explained in the story, but it left you with this impression that they had deliberately. But why? What was in it for them? What was in it for them to cover up the figures? And I heard Keith mention before about this. I know it's really important to the producers of that program, trying to track down this peak exposure period. And I've talked to Andrew Gibbs about it myself. But you've got to keep this in perspective, because even if there was a peak exposure period identified and the exposure limits were higher than the study has suggested, you're talking about parts per trillion. Even if you doubled the exposure level, it is still actually quite a minor exposure. OK, it's above what the rest of the country has experienced.
For that matter, they also found there may have been an exposure period after 1974.
I'm most unimpressed that I was exposed to dioxin in those levels, and I know that my father kept a very vigilant eye on IWD. He never trusted them, but they were working with extremely limited regulations and rules. And I mean, I think my listener story highlighted about how he used to go out and do his own investigations, and how, you know, he used to use his children as his eyes and ears about what the discharges on the beaches. Yeah.
I did think Keith had a point, and I had sympathy for them and the people working on the show. You've done battle with government departments before. They do have huge resources, don't they?
Well, they do, but I think the mistake that the Ministry of Health may have made here is that it's not always a good idea to put your top man up. The top person, or top woman, the top person doesn't always understand the issue, I mean, especially in health, because it's so specialised. I think Mark Jacobs made the mistake of not actually deferring to a lower level official who was right on top of it.
Because he did look like he was floundering at times.
Yeah, and officials do have a bit of arrogance about them at times, that they know everything. And he may well have been better to have, I don't know what his communications advice was. Yes, I've seen it before, especially with health officials, actually. They're particularly bad at it, but other officials as well.
Yeah. Now, Rick, you weren't in the top job at the TBC at the time all this happened. Justine Wilkinson sent Matt McClelland away with a flea in his ear. I wonder what would have happened anyway if she had taken the complaint further, because I'm guessing there still isn't any process for this kind of thing. Is that the case?
Well, the difficulty with the award itself was that the judges only had so much information. You can't, every time you get a complaint or an allegation that there is something wrong with an award or with a program, you can't just take that allegation and apply it as fact. And that was the issue we had here. There was an allegation, there was no fact, there was nothing proven. And to delay it 2 years, that's justice denied too. So, you know, so we had to act within a 2-week period, because, and I saw that letter. I did see the letter from ESR in my position as COO of TV Works at that time, and it just, you know, the relevance of the claim or the validity of the claim really wasn't at issue. That wasn't what it was about. It was about the fact that it was just a claim, not a proven fact.
And presumably it would be trivially easy for someone who wanted to get back at the journalist who'd written a story about them to make a complaint and then say there's a complaint, you can't give the award.
It's certainly not the first nor the last time that's happened, that there have been complaints about awards, you know, as they're being judged.
Did you also see the complaints about the subsequent news broadcast, which in some ways I thought had bigger problems than the documentary? I mean, there was one broadcast where the BSA, you know, as part of the same issue, found against 3 News on balance, fairness and accuracy. It was a complete disaster.
Look, I saw it, but I can't comment on it. That wouldn't be right for me.
Sure. Phil, you're a specialist in long, deep investigative stories. Is it going to be the case that you'll never quite get all your I's dotted and your T's crossed in a story like that you may leave things trailing?
Well, you should always endeavour for it, obviously, for it not to be the case. But I mean, I didn't actually see that documentary, so I don't really want to go into that one way or the other. But I mean, my issue is more with the Qantas Awards, and it's more with the print awards.
And we're talking about the print awards, which are now
the print
separate,
awards,
yes.
which are separate to the broadcasting awards. I mean. And you know, plenty of journalists have got gripes about this. But if I give you one example from this year, the Don Post, who I write for, so clearly I've got a bias, but you know, I can put that up front. Their story on Tony Veitch didn't even make the final cut of 3 stories for print story of the year. The stories that made the final cut were the Tamaheri industrial fire, the Herald's Owen Glenn story, and a story from the Listener on problems with housing. Now, I find it unbelievable that the Veitch story, which was an enormous story and played very straight by the Don Post, didn't even make that final cut of the stories of the year. But that
happens to all of us, Phil.
It does happen to all of us. But then the story of the year that won was the Tamaheri industrial fire. Now, it beggars belief for judges to say that routine daily coverage, which I'm sure was done exceptionally well by the Waikato Times, that becomes the story of the year. The story of the year. You know, I'm sorry, who are these judges? And what planet are they on in terms of journalism if they think that
so
leave Veitch out, look at the Herald story. That qualifies, that was a major story, it was a major scoop, it led the news agenda for weeks, and yet...
So why do you think they made decisions like that? How do you fix it?
I think there's going to be... well, I know for a fact that there are already quite high-level talks from very influential people in the newspaper industry who are demanding changes to the Qantas Print Awards, and that's going on virtually as we speak. One thing I would like to see is, you know, we're in the news industry, we try and demand transparency of other people. Why the hell can't we see, as journalists and the public, to give credibility to awards like this? You notice it there with Matt McClennan talking about asking for the judging criteria. Why on earth, Rick, wouldn't your organisation allow them to see what the judging criteria was for investigation of the year?
Rick, answer that. Because it is a mystery.
It's true. We do keep the criteria confidential so that when the entries are made, that there is no skewing towards those criteria, that it's just a straight entry. And so they're kept confidential from all sources.
But that's ludicrous, because that means that you're entering into a category that you don't really know why you're entering into it, because you don't know what the criteria is.
Well, and I suppose the other issue... Oh,
there is a clear description of the category and what is required. What isn't revealed is the percentage or of each criteria. So, is journalism worth more than camera work on the, that sort of thing?
Can I chip in here? I mean, I haven't entered I think I've entered Qantas once in the last 20 years, though I did win one when I was very young. My criticism of the Qantas Awards is that there's this huge proliferation of categories. I mean, it's almost impossible not to win, it seems. And no, but journalists don't even take any notice anymore. It's sort of devalued the currency so much. And the other thing that I find annoying about awards, and I don't know how you get around them, and working for a small news organisation, I really feel this, is that the big organisations, the whole thing is skewed so much in their favour, because these so-called scoops, and all respect to Phil, because I think Phil, is different to the average journalist in many ways, is that so many scoops, especially in politics, fall on these people's laps. And they don't fall on their laps because they're good journalists. They fall on their laps because they work for the big organisations. And I find working for a new organisation, if I break a story, I have sweated blood to get those stories.
So what's the solution here? To perhaps have local judges who appreciate the dynamic that's going on and how people get these stories, keep up to date with the stories themselves?
The first thing should be transparency, Russell. I mean, as I was saying before, we demand transparency of everyone else. Well, why shouldn't we have transparency in what is supposed to be honouring the best of journalism? So put up the criteria, then why can't the judges then put up their reasoning, their rationale for coming to their decisions? And, with a blowtorch like that on them, they might come up with not such stupid decisions as they occasionally do come up with.
Yeah, and there should probably be some category for nomination from third parties, rather than, because it's based on self-nomination, effectively. And, a lot of reporters I know are made to enter. They don't particularly want to. They're given the day off to put their entries together.
So actually, but before we run out of time, I'd like to ask, Rick, who are the judges? Are they New Zealanders? Are they overseas? Because I know in the print ones it's gone backwards and forwards from local judges to overseas judges. No one ever seems to like either solution. Is it important that the judges understand the context that stories emerge in?
Absolutely. The vast majority of the judges are local judges from New Zealand, definitely. Yeah, and that is important. It's always tricky getting the right judges, though, because you don't know who's going to enter. And so very often the people you might want as a judge, the person you might want as a judge, may have entered, and so obviously is disqualified. So, so there is some angst that goes on about selection of judges. There's no question.
I think we should cut Qantas a bit of slack here. This is not a Qantas issue either. No. I mean, Qantas are simply the sponsors, and very generous sponsors. I mean, I've had a great time off Qantas, but the issue is not Qantas. These are not decisions that are being made by them.
No.
But and you're never going to get judging absolutely right in anything, are you? I mean, look at the criminal courts. You're never going to get it absolutely right. But there have been some pretty bizarre decisions that have come out. And we all know that as journos.
Well, we actually do have to go now, and I don't think we've gotten anywhere in deciding exactly what we should do if this kind of thing happens again, but thanks for trying anyway. That does conclude this discussion, but clearly not the debate itself. Thank you, Marie McNicholas, Rick Friesen and Phil Kitchen. After the break, the naughty boys of radio.